I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Nadine Wellwood. Nadine ran in the last federal election and has been an entrepreneur for 30 years. She has worked in aerospace and defense, health, wellness, and finance. Nadine has remained active in politics and continues to share her views and opinions on YouTube and other social media. Please let's give a warm welcome to Nadine Wellwood.
Wow, tough act to follow. My opinions and views can't easily be read and seen on YouTube. I'm from Newfoundland, so I'm not sure if I get the opinions from that or from the fact that I've lived here for 16 years. Again, my name is Nadine Wellwood. In 2019, I did run for federal politics. I ran for the People's Party of Canada. And many people will probably, why would you do such a thing? And one of your members actually here on the website said it really well. And to quote Brenda Day, she said, "The freedoms you give away today are the freedoms your grandchildren will never know existed tomorrow." The loss of those very freedoms for my daughter and for your children, our grandchildren, that was not acceptable to me then. It is not acceptable to me now, nor should it be acceptable to you. No. Freedom too frequently dies in silence. It needs people like you and I, exactly what we're doing here today, to defend it. It needs a voice, your voice. For many years now, I have shared my concerns about our attacks on our freedoms, especially our freedom of speech. Take a look around at the amount of censorship everywhere today. I have spoken in defense of freedom, fairness, respect, and responsibility. It is only right that our governments do the same. I have always demanded that the government recognize and uphold one rule of law that applies to all of us equally. We are all equal citizens, and we reject special privileges granted on some at the expense of the many. Freedom applies to us all, to each and every citizen. It does not discriminate. It does not care if you are black or white. It does not care what race you are. It does not care about your sexual orientation. But it does not force one person's view on another. It seeks truth and encourages debate. Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah. This is what tolerance is about. Tolerance is understanding that your freedoms end where mine begin. Freedom does not partake in identity politics. It does not support a cancel culture. It sees only people who are equal under the law, each striving to do their best with what they have each and every day. The role of government is really quite simple. It has one purpose and one purpose only: to protect the most basic foundation of our society, and that is your individual rights. Now, I could end my speech right here, but they told me I have to speak for 20 minutes, so you're stuck with me. They put me at the end, and I said, oh, sure, leave the political person to the end, and then go and watch the crowd scatter. They want to make sure you all leave. So when I was asked to talk today, though, I thought about how best to tackle this subject. And being a little political, I thought, why not? You've heard from so many people about the stats, the data, the medicine, and they've shared their views and their opinions on the lockdowns. But I know for many of you, you're not much interested in politics, but politics is very interested in you. I like, too, to focus on the causes, not only the symptoms. And I thought I would share a little bit of a political viewpoint. And in my opinion, the real crisis we experience today is not one of health. That may be their excuse. The real crisis is actually in government. The real crisis is a lack of leadership. I want to thank the organizers, because it's events like this that allow our voices to be heard, that allow other people to see a different view, to hear a different viewpoint. And that's how we change the world. One person, one event at a time. So I'm going to start with an example of someone and some state that I think did a very good job of doing things differently around COVID. This person has demonstrated, in my opinion, real leadership. Ms. Kristi Noem, Governor of South Dakota. Should have known this crowd has heard of her. Well, Ms. Noem consulted a multitude of experts, from medical experts, and a variety of them, from psychologists to virologists. She consulted with constitutional lawyers. She consulted with teachers. But you know who she consulted with, most important? The people.
Wow.
She asked the people that she represented, the families, the business owners, who every decision that she made were going to affect.
Yeah.
Where's Mr. Kenney? Did he ask any of you?
No.
Mr. Trudeau?
No.
She resisted the fear and the propaganda pushed by a media narrative, and she formed a much different response. She never forced a single school to close, never asked children to wear masks.
Wow.
She never demanded a single business or a church to refuse its members service. She never arrogantly, government's not arrogant, is it?
Oh, yeah.
Not at all. Or wrongly determined what was or who was more essential than another. When she was asked why, her answer came very easy. She said it's not the role of government. She openly shared information, she communicated, and she coordinated mitigation efforts to protect those who were most vulnerable without negatively impacting those who were least affected. Isn't this the role of all governments? She did all of this without mask mandates or lockdowns. She did all of this while allowing her state citizens to make their own choice. They were free to choose what was their acceptable level of risk that they were willing to take without ravaging an entire economy. The key here is she trusted. Let me repeat that. She trusted her people to make the right decisions for themselves, their families, their businesses, as per their circumstances. Now, she was mocked, ridiculed, even threatened, but she held firm. Is this not leadership?
Yes.
Doing that which is right because you know it to be right, not because it's popular. In fact, when she started this, she was the only one. She stood alone, and she did it because she knew it was the right thing to do. She knew that government, let me stress this, government does not have the authority to tell you how to live your life. It does not have the authority to tell you what business is essential and what is not. No government, this is still a free society, and no government has that authority. Now, you might wonder, what were the results of the lockdown? So no mandates for masks, no lockdowns. She trusted the people. They've weathered the crisis very well. In fact, when you consider the total cost, we've had some people today talk about the total cost, not just the number of cases. South Dakota arguably has actually outperformed and done much better than most states that were the most restrained. No more reported deaths, no more reported cases, and they currently are enjoying a very robust economy. So what did Governor Noem do differently? Well, to start with, she did not tell the people what they were going to do. She gave them information, made recommendations, provided advice and guidance. She shared balanced, objective information. She didn't accept just a media narrative. She combated this fear and the propaganda, and she trusted her citizens to do what was right for them. Governor Noem trusted the people to make competent and capable decisions. She knew they were capable of assessing the risk for themselves, and they would make decisions that were right for them and their families. It is not government's responsibility to tell you what to do. She outright rejected what every other government has done, and that is prescribe a one-size-fits-all approach. Imagine if Justin Trudeau or Jason Kenney had taken a similar approach.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Would have been a much less painful year. In the face of adversity, Ms. Noem demonstrated to the world what true leadership, in my opinion, looks like. She often stood alone in her own conviction, based upon fact. Science is a word that's been hijacked, I think. Not media narratives, not an opinion, and she communicated those facts and restricted her own authority to its proper jurisdiction. What does true leadership look like? A real leader does not ask of anyone more than they are willing to do themselves. Leaders follow the same rules that they ask those of which they lead. They walk their talk. Mr. Kenney talked some pretty big talk. He's not really walking it. Their actions are consistent with the spoken word. Leaders seek justice, and I want to talk here for a moment about justice, because I want to point out there's a difference between what is legal and what is just. Those two words do not mean the same thing. Leaders seek relevant information, but they continue to be teachable. So I want to stress an open mind. In order to be receptive to a difference of opinion, you have to have an open mind. And our political leaders have ignored qualified and respected individuals in their field to show favor only to those who support their own narrative. Barrington Declaration, anyone?
Yeah.
Now, how many of you voted for Miss Dina Henshaw? No hands? Leaders seek to solve problems. Governments usually create problems. It appears that Ms. Noem recognized what the problem actually we're facing is today, and she simply refused to become that problem. So as I stated earlier, the true problem we find ourselves today is actually not COVID-19. This is a battle, and it is a battle for our freedom. We find ourselves confronted with a corrupt and very unjust system of government, one that refuses to uphold the law. I can't help but read, "I am Canadian." My goodness, if our government officials would only take the time to read it. The government refuses not only to uphold the law, but it grants special privileges to some at the expense of the many. It censors, it silences the critical thinkers and dissenting viewpoints. It no longer respects our individual rights and freedoms. Yet it is these very rights and freedoms that separate us from every other despotic government in the world, and there are many. These inalienable rights are enshrined in our legal and our political systems. And they are put there not only to protect you and I now in this moment, but they are there so that the generations to come will know freedom and peace. This is how we avoid the madmen, the Stalins, the Maos, the Pol Pots of the world. Is through enshrining these inalienable rights in our Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And it is the government's responsibility, their primary responsibility, to uphold them. Leaders seek and speak the truth. Without the freedom of our own conscience, without the freedom of expression, to speak, to debate ideas and thoughts, finding the truth, coming to truth, is next to impossible. Today's cancel culture threatens our freedom of speech, and it does not believe in truth, but rather, it promotes nothing but opinion and emotion. Leaders accept responsibility for their actions, for their decisions. They listen to the people, they advise, they gather information from all sides. Not just one side, all sides, holistically before they chart a course. Somebody mentioned earlier, Colonel Redmond, emergency response, has gone around the world, and yet we didn't have the sense enough to even ask him, let alone listen to what he had to say. Ultimately, it's our politicians who have abdicated their responsibility, and now they hide behind unelected officials, bureaucrats who are not accountable to you and I, the public. Alberta, Canada, the world has paid a significantly higher price than was necessary, not because of a virus, but because of the overreach and the arrogance of government officials. The cure is not supposed to be more expensive and cause more damage than the disease. The leader of any country cannot myopically assess one and only one aspects of their responsibilities. They must assess all of them equally, and they must assess them from the perspective of the economy as a whole and from the individual rights and freedoms. They must never act in such a way that infringes upon not only the physical needs, but the social, mental, emotional, and spiritual needs of the people that they are actually supposed to serve. British Columbia has had more opioid-related deaths in 2020 than COVID deaths. So where's the pandemic actually lie? Canada's suicide rates are some of the highest levels we've ever seen. Youth depression, unemployment, somebody mentioned the debt. Debts have to be repaid. Not to mention the undiagnosed cancers and treatments. That's the total cost. If South Dakota is an example of anything, it is proof that lockdowns are unnecessary. And in fact, they have caused more harm than good. Still, here we are, 1 year later, after, it's just 2 weeks. 1 year later, well, some states, Florida, South Dakota, Texas, the list goes on, are enjoying their freedom, sitting out on a balcony right now enjoying a beer. We continue with harsh lockdowns. Mr. Kenney refuses to open the economy. He refuses to lift the restrictions, and worse yet, he continues to move the goalpost or agree to his own terms, despite the evidence. I'm going to share a quote that Dr. Theresa Tam, everybody's favorite person, restated this week. Her quote is, "Her early low-risk claim for the virus was correct." Now I'm going to repeat that because she's actually saying here her early on, her low-risk claim for the virus was correct. So, this is not such a big pandemic after all, perhaps. She states, it was not wrong. It is just that it is important to also provide what the future state might look like. She added, public health agencies need to be prediction organizations and not just assess the risk of the present moment. This is not the role of government, to predict a hypothetical future outcome. This is absurdity. Miss Notley, she'd have us in a worse situation. As the real data comes in and the truth is harder to deny, the reality is our politicians have failed us. They have abdicated their responsibility to unelected bureaucrats who apparently predict the future, making their best guesses about future outcomes that never come to light. They themselves have created a crisis and have now deemed themselves rulers. They have failed to uphold the most basic tenet of a free society, the right of the individual. Their failure to consider all the factors from a holistic perspective have caused more damage and more harm than was needed. What do we learn from all of this? Well, we cannot change the past. Somebody already said it. We can only look forward. But it is important to learn from the past so that we never repeat it. So here's the catch. They claim the crisis of COVID-19, but in reality, it does not end here. This is a battle for our freedom. Your freedom, my freedom, our children's freedom. And governments have now set a precedent. They know what we're willing to accept, what we're not willing to accept, how long they can get away with this. They have perfected their system of fear-mongering and propaganda campaigns, and they will use this again in the future. There will be the next crisis. Oh, there always is, for government will never let a good crisis go to waste. Government, just like every corporation, it seeks to grow. It seeks to gain more control and more power. We must stop the intrusion of government in our personal lives. After all, government is our creation, and we must take back control of this thing. We must hold our elected officials to a much, much higher standard. We have to hold them to account for their actions, for their decisions, and for the harm that those decisions, those actions may cause. Government was created by man, please don't take offense, ladies, to protect our liberties, our freedoms, our rights. It does not have the authority to override these rights for any reason, at any time, and during any event. Here comes the hard part, because we too have made mistakes. How often have we said, the government should do something about that? We all do. It's okay. Many times we make demands of our government that we ourselves should accept responsibility and not abdicate to others. You see, government has the power it has today because we've given it to them.
Exactly.
But it's time to take it back. Government is happy to assume the power that we freely give them. But with freedom comes personal responsibility. And before we look to government to answer our problems, we should really consider if that is indeed what we want. Let's take health for an example. How many Canadians would honestly want the government to be 100% responsible for their health and their wellness for them and their families? Do you really want a small group of individuals unknown to you dictating what you can eat, what you can drink? Mr. Gates believes that insects and plant proteins is better than real meat. I like beef. Still okay? Here's a good one. How about a prohibition on alcohol? That'll go over well. Lost most of you right there. Soda pop? What if the only exercise you were allowed was yoga? My dad actually calls it yogurt. Is it acceptable to mandate that everybody wear a mask in a public place? Is it acceptable now that vaccines of every kind are now mandatory? The list is endless. The truth is, either we are free or we are not. I'm going to repeat that because that's important. There's no middle ground. We are either free or we are not. Now, there are only two types of government. The first type promotes and protects freedom, equality under the law. Now, do you need a special privilege? Do you need a special privilege? Do you need a special privilege if everybody is equal under the law? No, you don't, because we all have the same opportunities. And then there are those governments that do just that. They grant you a special privilege, but that privilege comes at the expense of a friend, a neighbor, a colleague. It comes always at the expense of others. One leads to prosperity, the other to tyranny. Every act of government is an act of force, and we need to remember that. Every dollar a government gives is a dollar it had to take. Every special privilege it has granted, it has had to take or infringe upon somebody else's. Again, the single most important function of government is to protect and secure the individual rights and freedoms of its citizens. Rights and freedoms in Canada are granted by a much higher authority than man. They are actually granted to us from a creator. Now, some people take offense to this, but it's very crucial, it's critical in our legal system that our laws are made, our rights are founded on a creator. These rights are enshrined in our Bill of Rights, our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the Constitution. But why is this so important? Because if our rights are granted by men and women, then they can take them away. It's not a right, it's a privilege. And then we would be forever subjected to the whims, the dictates of an individual or a small group of people who happen to have a little authority. In a free society where the rights of the individuals are protected, those rights granted from a higher authority, from a creator, it is the right of every citizen to pursue his or her own faculties to the fullest extent possible. In fact, it is your obligation in search of your greatest potential, in search of your own personal health, growth, and happiness. Government is a creation of man, and as such, it has no authority to determine the value or the worth of you, your business, to tell you what is best for your family and what is essential and what is not. The single biggest threat I see today to our civil liberties, to our freedom, to our individual right to life, liberty, and property is the very government that was put into place by us to protect these very rights. Thomas Paine stated, "Rights are not gifts from man to one man to another, nor from one class of men to another, Now I want to share, I'm a big fan of Frederic Bastiat. I'm a chartered investment manager. I've dabbled a little bit in finance. And there's a great book called The Law. Ingrain that in your head. It's called The Law. It's available in the public domain. You can go search it, read it. It's 80 pages, take you about an hour. It talks about the proper function of government. And Frederic Bastiat states, life, liberty, and property do not exist because men have made laws. On the contrary, it was the fact that life, liberty, and property existed beforehand that caused man to make laws in the first place. Government is meant to be protection of those rights, those liberties. If we have learned anything, my hope, this is my hope today, is that we recognize just how far we have strayed from the true purpose of government, the protection of those civil liberties. And we must work once again to bind and restrict government to its proper function. Now, I believe this starts with changing how we vote. We have an election coming up. We need to elect leaders, individuals, not parties, that will defend the basic tenets of our free society. It is individuals who acknowledge and respect the rights of the individual, who will uphold that each person is created equal under the law, and most importantly, outspokenly defend those rights. If we want change, then we ourselves must be willing to change. We must be the agents of that change. If we want honesty, transparency, and authenticity in our government, then we have to elect people, not parties, people who are honest, transparent, and authentic. We must change how we vote. We need to elect leaders, individuals. Again, this is not about party politics. That's a big reason why we're in the mess that we're in. No more bums that sit in a seat that just parrots a party leader, that allow themselves to be whipped to comply with the party line, who are afraid to speak on any issue without the approval of their party. What is the role of our elected MPs, our MLAs, if it is not to be our voice? We pay their salaries, not a party, not a leader of a party, you and I, the taxpayer. And look around, where are our MPs? Where are our MLAs? Where are our local officials today? All but a few sit in silence.
Their hands are tied.
I'd like to tie their hands. We are not all in this together. What sacrifices have they had to make as a result of their own policies? Now, we're all human. We're all capable of making mistakes. We're all capable of succumbing to fear, corruption, and error. We have to accept that individuals do make mistakes. Perfection is not the goal, but honesty and sound principles should guide every decision in government. Today we are faced, I promise I'm coming to the end. Today we are faced with many challenges. Our conservative values are under attack. Common sense values, really, that are time-tested, they're proven through the observation of the right outcome. Censorship is everywhere. By limiting our freedom of speech, this is a death sentence to a free society. Without the freedom to speak, to challenge, to debate, that is to condemn the truth, and freedom will die in silence. But there is hope. As we look around, look to your left, look to your right, look at the people here today. More and more people are waking up. Thanks to people like you. things that each of you do every day that changes the world. One thought, one idea, one person at a time. It is amazing to me what a small group of individuals can accomplish when they are determined, when we stand together with conviction and a purpose. We each have an obligation to defend freedom. We will not be silenced because of fear, a fine, objection, threat, or force. The truth demands much more of us. It is our responsibility to share the knowledge that we have, the knowledge that we learn with friends, family, with colleagues, really with anyone who is willing to listen. This is not the time to be shy. Change comes when we act as the agents of that change. We must look forward, not backward. We must speak up for what we want. Never settle for the lesser of two evils. If we do not tell people what we want, if you do not ask, you will not get. So, we must change the way we vote, not only with our ballot, but with our wallet. Somebody said it earlier. Support those who support us. Find those local businesses that you can walk into and support them. Support those who stand and are vocal in the defense of freedom. Our forefathers, our veterans, deserve as much, don't you think? We must encourage people to think critically about things. They must encourage them to see what's actually happening around them, but do so with compassion, with kindness. Engage them with questions, not facts. You don't win people over with facts, regrettably. Fact is not a good weapon against emotion. But we must help others to see truth, gently, but without shame, without guilt, and certainly without remorse. Now is the time to be courageous. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, author of the Gulag Archipelago, I'm a little bit of a bookworm. His expose on the truth about communist Russia and the much harm caused by socialist regimes said this: "The simple step of a courageous individual is not to partake in the lie." I'm going to repeat that. The simple step of a courageous person is not to take part in the lie. I will end with this. Courage is contagious, and I promise you, your courage will inspire others to be courageous also. I'll do a little Nancy Pelosi. Thank you.